So, welcome to Better You. We have some questions for you about our dash, and you have some questions for us, right? So, how did you start your career in the NHS, and was working within health services something you always aspired to do?
Okay, so I think it's my mum's fault.
Okay.
Okay, so my mum, G, used to run schools for people with learning disabilities. And so most of my time growing up, I would spend some time in that school, which is called Ashmount in Loughborough. Um, and then when I didn't want to, my school had a sort of military thing going on that you'd do once a week. And I didn't want to do that for a bunch of reasons. And so I used to go and visit care homes and stuff. So if you put those two experiences together, I guess I got interested in how we care for people and interested in the communities that I was living within. And then when I left university and I thought, what do I want to do? That seemed like a place to go, and they're quite a good sort of training scheme and program to develop you. So I joined that, and then I've sort of never left, and that was 30 years ago.
Oh yeah,
Which
that's
makes me sound really dull, doesn't it? But
no,
that was the
yeah.
idea, you know?
No, so you enjoy helping people in that aspect of people with mental health.
Yeah, so I enjoy helping people, and I think the NHS was born out of communities when it was born
Yeah.
out of communities in Wales and stuff. And I think we need to see it more as an extension of communities. So I guess that's what I'm passionate about and what we're trying to do in this place we call Ardash, so Rotherham, Doncaster, South Humber, that provides mental health services for kids and for adults and older adults and provides physical health services. What we're trying to do is to connect the community with the NHS. That's what I get really excited about trying to do.
That's good. Yeah.
So, like, we've been for about, working, like, NHS and Irish for about 30 years. Like, you must be very proud to be, like, the CEO of it. Like, can you tell us, like, what is your, like, sort of, what your sort of typical day looks like, and, what you feel your greatest achievement has been in the past, over the last 2 years?
Thanks, Ron. Yeah. Okay. So everybody, when they're asked what's your typical day, I bet everybody you interview, so I haven't got a typical day. It's all very different. I suppose the nature of my job, so being chief executive means I'm responsible for the safety of the patients and the safety of the staff. So I guess a lot of the time I'm in conversations about things that have gone wrong or things that are really difficult. So I probably spend about half of most weeks, probably half of most days in those kind of conversations, maybe with somebody that we've harmed or with a problem where we're trying to run a service and it's not going so well. And then I like to try and spend quite a lot of time out listening to people, because you can get really cut off from reality when you're doing a job like chief executive. You end up in an office, everybody runs around after you, makes you a cup of coffee and stuff, and you end up disconnected from people. So I suppose I do quite a lot of wandering about to try and get past that. You asked me what I'm proud of. We've got 4,000 people who work for us, got students, 300 odd volunteers, and I'm always impressed by the dedication and the compassion that people show, particularly at a time when the NHS sometimes is, I don't know, we're under attack, but I think people are less confident about the NHS than maybe they were when I was growing up and a bit younger. We've done a lot of work on poverty. So the reality is, after 10 years of austerity, after a pandemic, in a community like Doncaster or in Scunthorpe or in Rotherham, most of the conditions that we see coming in the health service are made worse by people living without much money, or living with fear about where their next paycheck's going to come from, or living with insecure housing or whatever else. So we've done a lot of work to play our part in that. So all of our staff are now paid something called the real living wage, which is higher than the NHS's kind of basic rate. And so that should keep pace with things like gas prices and food prices. We're also doing work to look at how our services exclude people who are living in poverty. So, famously, it's a guy called Michael Marmot who writes about this. He said, if the people who have the least money in this country followed the NHS's eating well advice,
Yeah.
do you know, 3/4 of all their money would go on that. So it's good advice, but it doesn't work because no one's going to do that. I wouldn't do that, So we're really trying to focus on something we call poverty proofing. So looking at our services and looking at how they exclude people Yeah, even things like, well, could you get, can you come to the appointment? You've got to pay your bus fare in advance. Well, is there a way in which we could pay for that to sort of take the cash transaction out of it? So I'm really proud of the stuff we've done on poverty. And then I'm really proud of the stuff we've done listening to people. Because I think what the NHS does for most of the time I've worked in here is when we want to do something, we come to a place like Better You and ask you what you think about our something.
I felt a lot
Do
of
you
that with when I met with Julia.
Okay.
Like when I was looking at starting volunteering at Ardash.
Yeah.
She like because I've had a lot of anxiety with buses and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I discussed a lot with Julia. Like helped to figure out a way for me to get used to buses, get used to being in a working environment, and Julia's helped a lot with
That's
that.
really good to hear, man, because what we're trying to do is make sure when we're doing that listening, whether it's like Julia has with you or whether it's conversation like today, is that listening keeps going. So like I was saying, not just come out and do a conversation once and then disappear and go and do our thing. So that's why at Ardash we've got public representatives, patient representatives on all our decision making groups, which sounds really obvious, doesn't it, when you say it like that? But that isn't what the NHS normally does. So you asked me what I'm proud of. I'm really proud that we're trying to do that stuff. It's an experiment. It might not work, but it's sincerely meant. So I'm proud of that stuff too.
It's good that you're trying to be more supportive, because I bet most up and down country you don't always see that.
I think not, but I suppose if I talk to people who work with patients, any patient relationship you might have, it starts with whether you trust the person who's looking after you, doesn't it? So the same thing applies to the NHS that is Ardash. People around here need to trust, and you only get trust by having conversations and talking. Do you know what I mean? Listening.
Yeah.
So I think it comes back to that. But yeah, so it's
like-
good work. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's like burn up them reports sort of thing.
I think so. I think build up a conversation about what's important to people. Like, what's important to you is that anxiety about transport
And
stuff.
try to overcome that.
That's really important, isn't it? Whereas for a lot of my staff, if you talk to them about what's great about Ardash, they'd say you can park for free. You and I, we're sitting here opposite DOI. The guys have really struggled to get car parking spaces for the staff, but for my staff, being able to park for free is really important to them. So you got to listen to people if you're going to work out what matters to them.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's glad to hear that you were very proud of what you do with Ardash.
Yeah.
And you're proud of the different things you've accomplished. What parts of Ardash and NHS you think needs to be improved on, and would you like to put your focus on mainly? What parts would you focus on?
Sure. I think so people are waiting way too long.
Yeah.
So we've got this promise, we call it, because we've got 28 promises that we made, and it happens to be promise 14, which is about trying to get down to a 4-week waiting time. And for a lot of services, not all services, we're pretty confident we'll get there. And I guess what's important about a 4-week waiting time is partly it's important that it's quite short. So if I got referred, or my son or my daughter got referred, they'd be seen quite quickly. But what's also important is that people can kind of have some confidence in it. Because I know if you've ever been referred to the health service, but you go and see your GP and your GP sends off a letter or an email, you don't really hear anything. And then you're thinking, well, have I been referred? Has anything happened? When am I going to hear? It's quite a weird process, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think people having some confidence that, if you were referred, well, if you hadn't heard inside 4 weeks, then something's gone wrong. And that confidence, we talk about trust, don't we? That matters. So it matters that it's 4 weeks, but it matters that there's a bit of confidence, because I think people don't always feel held by the NHS, if that makes any sense. So I think that bit's got to go.
I mean, focusing on the waiting times, people with who are neurodiverse and want to get diagnosed with ADHD, autism, and other things like that, they're waiting upwards a year or 2 years
At least.
for that. And do you think there's any measures you can put in place or help put in place to help move up the times, make it less wait?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest issues we've got in there. I mean, it's not just an Ardash thing, it's a national thing. So if you look at young people who don't feel able to then maybe go on with education after they're 18 or going to work, there's a big crossover with those waiting times that you're mentioning, or twice as many kids are no longer going regularly to school. Again, there's a big crossover with those things. So we've spent about £3 million in the last 2 years trying to reduce our wait times.
I'm glad to
Thank you. I think we're making some progress. It's painfully slow, if I'm honest. The staff trying really hard. I think in 2 of our 3 places, we're expecting to get the wait time down below a year next year. Again, my same point about certainty. I think even if the wait time stays at 18 months, you ought to be able to write back to me as a parent and say your child will be waiting, and in this period of time you'll be seen, and also these are the things we can do for you in the intervening period.
Sounds nice
we
to
can be better at that. To be honest, sorry, Dan.
It sounds nice, sort of like have a bit of like an update or sort of thing, like they're kept in the loop. Because I've got autism myself. Like I know back when my mum got me diagnosed, I think she had to fight a lot for it and stuff. It's nice that seeing a bit more like progress towards that, and you're trying to give a bit more, like, well, maybe help alleviate some of the like by being kept updated, like, because I know, because like say you're just waiting endlessly, like could be cause a bit, well, could not be all the best, maybe cause a bit more anxiety or something like bit.
I think so. And if you got time and you go on I don't know, at Google or other places, and you type in Ardash Care Opinion, you can see all these stories from people that are waiting to use our services or have used our services. And I think for people that are thinking about maybe being referred for neurodiversity, that's quite an encouraging site to go and have a look at. Because, like you say, people do wait a long time, but there's some fantastic stories in there about what difference it's then made for people's lives. And I think building that confidence, because I think there's quite a nasty national conversation about ADHD and autism, isn't there? Some really daft things being said and really discriminatory things being said. And I think it's a potentially positive thing to receive a diagnosis if that's what you want. And I think it's really important we build that conversation.
Yeah.
I know you've also working towards that site over in Bentley, which is in that being aimed to support ADHD and autistic people.
Me and Ryman over there last month to have a look and like help give some ideas and feedback.
Well, I mean, look, you've got a great space here, haven't you?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can teach us. Yeah, you're right. So there's a building we used to use for something else in Bentley, and we've decided to dedicate it to being our neurodiversity centre. And part of the reason for doing that, I think, is sometimes in the NHS, you go somewhere and you get a diagnosis, and then we say, well, in the nicest possible way, over to you, off you go. And I think what I hope we can do at Bentley is have a place where people feel able to stay connected to a community. We do, I think, a lot of work on peer support and the help that people can get from other people who've had a diagnosis. So I hope that centre can be part of that conversation.
So a bit like how Better You operates, actually, because a lot of how Better You runs is through peer support. Like,
absolutely, yeah. We run our own events. We do like peer-led groups. We go out and do our own thing, help young people. Us just get out in the world and do it, like socialise, and something we weren't able to do beforehand before coming here.
Yeah. That feels important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really important, and I think, approximately 1 in 5 of people we look after with a mental health diagnosis is probably also got autism. This ought to be something where we become quite expert, but we also reflect on the expertise of people in our communities.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you want
many of our young people feel that like CAMHS is very like sort of reactive towards their mental health, but I think some thinking it should be maybe a bit more like proactive with their support. And how would you like sort of propose to like sort of improve it and increase like number of referrals being accepted by them?
Yeah, okay. There's a lot in that question. It's a really good question there. I think so I do think the 4-week wait is important, because I think 2 things about that related to CAMHS. One, I think if you need help, you need help. And secondly, I think there's a bunch of folk who don't decide to come forward for help because they think the waiting time's going to be really long, or they've heard it's going to be really long. So the 4-week wait, which for CAMHS we're meeting now with the exception of neurodiversity, as you said, feels important. But your question, I think, is about number of people who get refused from the service. So we've got 2 pathways now within CAMHS. One is getting help, one's getting advice. Both are equally important. And so it ought to be the case that people referred to us are in one of those 2 pathways. And one of the reasons for publicising what we're doing is so people can tell us, well, that's not my experience. And that's happened over the last 9 months. So there'll be lots of people, last year and the year before where that wasn't their experience. But the clinicians have done a lot of work on something we call the Thrive model to redesign their services. So I'm hoping that there's more there, but I'm meeting with a group of young people next Tuesday night, and I'm sure they're going to tell me that there are more online options we could offer, more alternatives to face-to-face connection, and we need to become better at that. I think that's also an important part of this.
I know another thing with CAMHS, I know CAMHS runs up to 18, and a lot of people, I think, who say we're with CAMHS, like probably like 14 to 18, like didn't say did you get well, it seemed like some of the stories I've heard of CAMHS and stuff, like say one person say sort of being they turned 18 and then just let go, or sort of thing, or sort of throwing out CAMHS, no more support anymore, and now I think they come to like say better you to get that support, because I feel like mental health, it doesn't really stop until
Of course not. No. And you've done a bit of work in the health service. We've got a bit of jargon for everything. So our jargon for that is transitional care. Not saying that's good jargon, that just happens to be our jargon. So you're absolutely right, and it's a priority for our Council of Governors, for RDASH, which provides young people's health services, and it provides working age adult health services, to be really good at transitional care. So all of our teams now have got at least one project in that space. One of the ones I'm excited about is NHS Talking Therapies, which is sort of the national cognitive behaviour therapy support programme for depression. We will now take people into that service from the age of 16, whereas the national programme is 18. So like you say, we're trying to break down some of those barriers, but we've got a long way to go, I think. And we need help on what that means, because most of us are in our 40s and 50s, and redesigning that pathway is often something we vaguely remember from 20 years ago. So we need to work with organisations like Better You to think about, well, what would help with that?
Maybe also pathway. Maybe not just organisations, but young people in
that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, like young people inside organisations to think, okay, well, what would be helpful? Because the NHS has got a real children's adult separation, and we've got to break some of that down, haven't we? Have services that carry on maybe to 25, but also have our adult services pick people up at from different ages, and we'll develop at. I'm not sure age is always the most helpful way to think about it. I've got some very mature 17-year-olds who maybe would work better in an adult service, and I've got people who are maybe 19, 20 who maybe need to stay with young person services for just a little bit longer. So maybe we need a bit more
just keeping that continuous support, and then moving them on to the next bit when they need that support. Or
but also being age appropriate. I mean, you guys talked about neurodiversity services. The neurodiversity service for somebody who's 9, 10, 11, I think probably needs to be different to somebody who's 15, 16, 17. I think those are 2 slightly different client groups, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about that kind of age group, do you have any measures in placement in schools to help get diagnoses for these young people, like in different schools in different areas, in those different primary schools, secondary schools, college? So the national programme is something called mental health support teams in every school, and we've currently got coverage for about 2/3 of schools locally, and we're just developing some more teams to kind of grow that. I think that can be really helpful, and often it means working with teachers and educators on their skills, if that makes sense. Some of my parents were in education. I get how pressured those jobs are, but that's probably quite important
thing to do.
They've got a lot to measure on their plate, as well as trying to help
They have.
diverse people. There's a lot to
They have.
balance, and some
There is.
teachers do struggle with that.
Some do
Other-
and
yeah,
some don't, do they? And
absolutely, yeah.
that's kind of the thing, is and some of
Yeah.
that's about skills and confidence and experience.
Absolutely.
So mental health support teams, I think, are part of that. I think the other thing we're trying to do, we've just taken on responsibility at Ardash for the autism service in Doncaster, which previously was split, and working with the local authority, we're trying to build a different relationship with schools for that service. But that doesn't move us away from the fundamentals that people should wait less time and
No, yeah.
have more rights within the system. So,
absolutely.
you know, sometimes these things are seen as alternatives, and I'm not sure they're alternatives. We need to get
Push them all into.
we need to get both right, if that makes sense. Because you know, you don't spend that long in school. I mean, it always feels like you spend a lot of time in school, but it's quite short, isn't it? 5
There's
to
a lot
18.
going on in school, especially from like secondary school. You're pushed to do a lot of different things, and if you
Yeah.
have these problems with diagnoses, teachers put you in the wrong groups, the wrong areas, and you struggle to get the education you need.
You can have a lot of bullying as well, like
Yeah.
from like because I know because when me and Mark we both went to the same school, both
Okay. Yeah.
very different experiences. Like I think I had a lot of support where I was able
Right.
to achieve to best. Well, I think Mark you didn't
I
have.
never had a diagnosis in secondary school. I'm trying to give that now.
Okay.
And I was labelled as like a problem child in school.
Yeah, okay.
I never got given the education I needed when I was at that school.
Sorry to hear
No,
that.
that's fine. I'm glad to hear there's procedures put in place to help students get diagnosed, to
Yeah.
primarily put them in areas where they could suit best, instead of being put in a problem I was put in, where I was just put from like there's top set in year 7 to like the bottom set onwards and onwards. It just put me down, and it felt discouraging from the school. They didn't want to deal with me, so they put me in other classes. But I would love to put things we put into place to stop that from happening, especially when like students with like ADHD or autism aren't diagnosed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in those like 4 or 5 years, it's very important that those diagnoses should be put into place.
Yeah, but
quite
I
early.
mean, it's a
Yeah.
positive diagnosis. It's potentially
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
superpower, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it isn't just about putting help into place. To
Yep.
you know, it's lots of things about people's full potential.
Yeah.
I think the NHS at the moment has just published a 10-year plan. The NHS does this every few years, and the big part of that is neighbourhood health. Now, to me, I don't see how you build neighbourhood health without working with schools.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's different things in different neighbourhoods, isn't there? But schools are pretty fundamental.
Yeah. it's like
So we need to work better with schools, and for reasons so obvious in terms of where I came in now. So I think that's a space we could do more.
Yeah,
See
absolutely.
what that could be.
Yeah.
Also, well, with working with schools and stuff, not just for students, but can maybe, because like I know with Ardash, there's a lot of push for like a work-life balance sort of thing. I see it on posters or whether when I'm in volunteering, like maybe, because I know when we were at school, I feel like a lot of teachers were very, like burnt out, very thing, like maybe trying to encourage a work-life balance for teachers as well.
Yeah, different like areas of expertise, even like warehouses, factories, schools, teachers, even doctors, put in places and just to help them support as well mentally, because I think a lot of it is draining.
Yeah, and I think you work for a long time, don't you? And maybe we could build a slightly better kind of work-life balance that does give people sabbaticals and time out. I mean, if you qualify as a consultant psychiatrist, you'd probably be qualified into a consultant role in your mid-30s, and the way the NHS was built, you do that till you were 65. That's a lot of work. What are the opportunities to support people who might want to make a contribution, but maybe need to take some time away, or do something just a little bit different. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit weird, isn't it, that the NHS and education, often people who work in those two industries are kind of coming with a similar motivation,
Yeah, two sides
but
of the
they're
same
very
coin.
separate. Very separate spaces. Like you say, we do a lot of work on apprenticeships. We do a lot of work on education. We're trying to build that connection to be a little bit better. And it can be done. I mean, it sounds fantastic, but it can be done.
That's good to hear. So going back to the young people side, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in young people, aged 5 to 24, and autistic individuals are 7 times more likely to die by suicide. Self-harm rates have doubled in young people aged 10 to 14 in the last decade, and young people are in crisis. What plans are being put in place to improve support available for children and young adults to support early intervention, and also improve mental health support for those with an autism diagnosis?
Okay. There's a lot in that
There's a
question.
lot.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. So, I think the first thing to say is there are all sorts of projects across South Yorkshire that specifically focus on this, whether that is in terms of preventive interventions or in terms of support to people who have maybe tried to complete suicide and have not done so, and what support we can provide after that. There's some quite exciting projects that reduce repeat attempts, if that makes
As someone,
sense.
this is a very
Okay.
at-home topic for me because I was someone in that state trying to commit suicide.
So,
I did get the help I needed. But
You did?
Yes, absolutely. This place
Okay.
helped me, and Safe Space. Safe
Yes.
Space is what helped me
Yeah.
most. I'm glad I got that kind of help. Do you think places like Safe Space, who help people in crisis,
Yeah.
are in all over the UK, or do they need?
yeah, so they're not, and obviously Ardash's invested quite a lot into Safe Space and the Wellness Centre. I think we invested a little bit into Better You. There's a plan to invest some more than that going forward. But you're right. I think part of that strategy then, yes, is individual, but is also creating spaces that have no barriers to entry. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not, I've got to be referred, I've got to do this. I can just go and be. Because I think sometimes people need to be in a different situation than the situation they're in, whether that's at home or at school, like we were saying, about bullying. So those feel like important things. You make a point about undiagnosed autism and autism support. Exactly as we were talking about, the investment of time and attention and knowledge in that space is quite important. And I think we're doing work on training for our staff to try and make sure there's perhaps better recognition of issues of neurodiversity that people might have. I think those are all part of the mix. I'm bound to say there's a social media and a digital component to this, isn't there?
Absolutely,
Obviously, there's a pretty dark world out there of sort of encouragement and role modelling that's not so positive, and government's taking action on that with the online bill. I guess we'll see how effective that is, but we all need to, I think, lean into that, and the NHS can't just sort of say, well, that's an over there thing. If you look at local suicide rates, they are comparable or slightly higher than national norms, but clearly, every death is a tragedy, and we need to keep on the work to try and tackle that.
It might be good having more places like Better You, but more aimed at like younger people, or like I know like I grew up with like with my autism stuff. I went to like a lot of youth groups when I was younger, sort of thing, like through a company, I don't know if it still exists, Aiming High, where they did like stuff where like say like Hatfield Water Park could do like different on the water, stuff like that. But like, or just a place to go and play pool like this. It'd be nice if there was something, like just something for younger people where they're not having to be babied or anything, but like just be, like just a place to go and chill out. That's keeping them away from, which might help build friendship, but also keep away from like either like self-isolate. Like I know I played a lot of video games, like say when I was younger, where I think like I didn't really have anywhere to go or meet people or anything.
Speaking on self-isolation, it's really I was going to say, but it's a topic I really want to focus on, because I stuck 6 years, didn't leave the house properly, hardly interacted with friends or people outside. Are there ways for people, or I guess the NHS, to help bring those people out and stuff? What I mean by that is making them feel comfortable socialising.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think sometimes in this country, when we talk about health, we immediately jump to the NHS.
Absolutely.
But the NHS is like a really, really small bit of the health service, and the kind of things both you are talking about, I think, are what we would think of as public health.
Okay.
And that's a local authority responsibility.
Yeah.
And I guess as the NHS, maybe we need to take a little bit less of the money
Okay.
and put a little bit more into
Public health.
public health.
So, may I ask-
Because we talked about austerity, the kind of youth clubs and things that you're talking about. That's the kind of stuff that disappeared, didn't it, during austerity? And I think if we're going to get that back, the NHS probably needs to be a little bit less greedy for the money that's around. That won't be my most popular comment, but
ask what the difference between public health and the NHS is.
now, as somebody who's got a public health degree, I'd better answer that. I suppose the NHS tends to provide diagnosis and treatment.
Okay.
Public health looks at the health of a community.
Okay.
But it also looks at the things that drive health. So, things like gambling, food, violence in the community, those sorts of factors. Does that make sense? So, intervening to tackle those things is really, really important. I mean, let me give you an example I think I understand quite well, which is most of the treatments we provide, certainly as a mental health organisation, will be much more effective if you have got a stable home, your housing is good, it's well, those kind of conditions are in place, and we need to keep investing in those things through our local authorities and through the voluntary sector. Otherwise, what the NHS does will be a lot less effective. So that isn't a way of saying your question's nothing to do with us. Yep. It's a way of saying maybe what we need to do as the NHS is to pass a little bit of the money across and encourage those things to happen.
Or maybe down the line, creating a place or something for people to.
Yeah, we're doing a bit of that. I must say, I think the way we'll do that best is to invest in voluntary sector and organisations. The NHS very often, when it sees a problem, decides the NHS is the answer. Does that make sense? I think sometimes our best answer is to invest in things people are already doing and build it up. Do you know what I mean? Like this place.
Yeah.
Rather than say, well, let's have an NHS version over there. Because I'm not sure we're always the best person to do, but sometimes we're the best person to maybe stand behind and support that, like you were saying about resilience and support to teachers or to social workers. Maybe that's our role, and let other people get on with it.
So
that makes sense.
Encouraging the progress.
Yeah, but also investing in it, standing behind it. I was chatting to some people about some homelessness work we're going to try and do here in Doncaster, where maybe the thing we do is we hold the lease for the building, because we're a £250 million organisation and people are okay with us doing that, but we don't do much else. That's done by other people inside the building, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with Betty, it's open from 10 till 4, so it's a good time for people to get out of the house and socialise and into a space if they're comfortable. From that time onwards, from 4 p.m. onwards, there's not really any other places overnight around this area. I don't know about other places in the UK, but somewhere like overnight could be really useful for someone who's in like a crisis, household they're not comfortable in.
Yeah.
Other places that can be put measures put in place to help people who need that kind of help.
So there was always going to be a question you were going to ask me where I didn't know the answer.
There
might be more than one of them.
That's fine.
I reckon that's a really good challenge, is to look at the hours of the things that we do.
Yeah.
Same point applies to weekends, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, HS tends to work on a Monday through Friday. It does stuff between 9 and 5, and then everything else is what we call out of hours. And I think that's a really good challenge as to what our response to that is going to be. One of the things we're trying to do as Ardash is we're trying to move more of our young people's services into the centre of the city of Doncaster, because I think we feel, to get to some of our services at the minute, you'd have to get 2 buses and all that, so there's things we can do to make them more accessible. But I think your point about availability is a really good one.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember I spoke to someone from Touchstone. She had a place in Measure, but didn't get the funding it needed.
Sure.
It was an overnight place that had beds and stuff, but because it didn't get funded, it had to shut down. Do you think there could be put measures in place to help put funding and stop things getting shut down? So things are already in place to keep the funding up.
So the NHS and money is tricky, isn't it? I mean, the NHS gets a lot more of the country's money than it did 20, 30 years ago. But we're perpetually broke. And every time we make a decision, somebody gets explained to them that it's because of the money. Yeah. And I guess we've got to make sense of that. So if we can if we can spend less of our money on big hospitals, we can spend more of our money on community-based projects like the things you've been talking about with Touchstone. And I think our challenge, and that's what makes my job interesting but difficult, is how you do both of those two things.
Could there be put measures in place? I keep saying that a lot. Sorry. For these places to help fund themselves, like put in like charity work, have like fundraisers go on and put into place.
There can be. I think. I guess the thing that sometimes that kind of engagement really gets people involved, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, sometimes, though, it creates an uncertainty where people don't support a project because they think, well, is it going to be here in a couple of years' time?
Yeah.
So, there's something about how do we invest to make sure those things are there, and the Sure Start centres from 15 odd years ago were part of that. Okay, for a younger age group, how do we make sure some of those centres, talked about youth clubs, are regularly in place?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, to be honest.
Yeah.
But as a public sector, as a local community, as civil society, we've got to do that stuff. And that means moving the money about. Probably does mean sometimes have to make difficult choices. I've closed, my organisation's closed 3 or 4 wards over the last 3 years, and people might see that as a bad thing. Generally, we've been able to invest some of that money then in developing community-based services.
Yeah.
But because you can see the wards and you can't always see the community services, that gets a bit difficult.
It's a bit like a balance thing.
It's a balance thing. So we need to build that confidence.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 out of 5 women are not listening to their GP and have their health concerns like sort of overlooked or could be misdiagnosed. How can you improve this to ensure patient voice is listened to? Another thing I know it's not a question. Also, I think a lot of and going back to like autism as well. A lot of females don't always get diagnosed as well for autism, or it's hard. Or I think a lot of females get diagnosed when they're older because they always get recognised at school.
That's right, isn't it? That's right. I think in our job we call that masking, but that sounds like it's the patient's fault, and it isn't. You've asked a really fundamental question. If you go through medical school, you will find that the pictures that are put on the screen of the human body tend to be pictures of men. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it seems really but my point is that's how fundamental this is. It's like really basic to how we work as a health system, that we work from men to women rather than doing something different. Yeah. So I think the women's health strategy nationally is all about trying to reset that balance and that awareness. What my board does within Ardash is we focus on the data about who's using our services, whether people from particular backgrounds or particular characteristics are waiting longer than other people. But it's a real societal challenge, not just an NHS one, it's a health one. And it's kind of really ironic, isn't it? Because 82% of the people that work for my organisation are female. 46% of the senior psychiatrists I have are female. So we need to explore, this isn't just a question of men not understanding or not listening to women, it's also a question of other pressures that are on families. Do people not present for things? Do people maybe represent their health in different ways? In terms of things like pain thresholds or in terms of anxiety. So it's a really, really good question. And it's one of the big challenges for the health service in the next few years. And here in Doncaster, we know that women in their 50s and 60s are dying in larger numbers than we would expect. And that is one of the big health challenges we've got as a health system.
Just trying to figure out why is that occurring.
Yeah, well, I think we can. Yeah, exactly right. I think we know the various factors. But when I've said to you how big this feels like it is, that sometimes then means everybody kind of goes, I'll take a step back because that feels not challengeable. So we need to take some steps towards improving it and then see what works, I think. Yeah.
So many of our young people feel like there's a training need for all staff within the trust to raise awareness of neurodiversity to better meet the needs of patients. Is that something that we will be looked at within the 20 promises, possibly Promise 8? And how do you promise to raise awareness and understand with your staff so they are better equipped to deal with neurodivergent individuals?
Yeah, great question. I think that's right. And we talked a bit earlier, didn't we? We talked about maybe 1 in 5 people who come to a mental illness service but perhaps have autism. So we start this year with all of the staff who are working in our wards having training in neurodiversity, additional training, particularly what we call healthcare support workers, who are the majority of people who are providing nursing-related care in our wards. So we start there. It's also the case that our induction, so effectively the process that people go through when they first join Ardash, which is probably about 15% of the staff in Ardash each year, will go through an induction which also includes that. Nationally, there is specific mandated training, which is related in part to a young man called Oliver McGowan who died in the care of the health service. But I think we need to make sure that the training we're offering people, they're able to create space to explore what it means to them. So I've talked about maybe my background in areas of diversity might be really strong in terms of working with people who have a learning disability, but really weak in terms of working with people who have autism. So, we've got to work with where people are, but I guess that's a really long yes to your question. And we need to make sure that there is a general awareness and that then there is very specialist skills in place for some folk.
That's really good to hear, yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of because with autism as well, it's like a whole spectrum. Like everyone is different. They need different needs and stuff like that. Like I know with for the volunteers, a few weeks back, I was looking at like I think Julie was looking at again, pointing out like a thing for volunteers, which is sort of like a wellness sheet sort of thing, where they can let their managers or whatever know what supports they might need and what could be put in place. Which I think is pretty good as well.
Yeah.
Having a way to give managers that sort of support. Is that also in place for people who are full-time staff as well, or is it only volunteers? Because I can't say if that's you.
I need to check. We're looking at our wellness plans at the moment. So I think if it's not already in place, it definitely can be. And we're doing some work. We have something called the Trust People Council, where we bring together staff representatives and volunteer representatives. And one of the issues that's been raised in there with the chairman, Kath Lavery, and with me, is the training and support we provide to staff who have neurodiversity in relation to their line manager. So I think the answer is it's on the agenda to do something about. But it's great that Julie is doing that work with volunteers.
Yeah, I was just curious because So going to the question, there is focus on improvement for apprenticeship and undergraduate training opportunities with the 28 promises. But where do you see young people fitting into future of the trust self-care? Because you got young people like me, so autism stuff, but also looking at maybe doing a career in
Sure.
is there opportunities for young lead roles or task force opportunities?
Okay. So I think the first answer is yes. So we have a group of people who are youth advisors who work with us as an organisation at the moment. This is the group of people I mentioned I was meeting next Tuesday. They are looking to have more and more influence. So this year, for the first time, when we did our kind of reporting back to the public, which we call our annual members meeting, we had a specific one that was organised and run by young people as a starting point. We'll do the same thing when we do the meeting here in Doncaster next year, and then the Council of Governors is going to be run by young people in its meeting in January. So I guess we're taking steps to what you're driving at, and we want to create opportunities for young people to work with us. I think historically at Ardash we have a set of children's services who have worked really closely with young people, but the dialogue has been between young people and children's services. Whereas if you just think about our conversation, we've talked about people going through that period from 16 to 25. We want to have a conversation with young people and have influence led by young people across all of our services, not just with children's services. So we're looking at ways in which we can give that much more profile. Some of that, you're right, is about apprenticeships, it's about employment opportunities. You've mentioned volunteering, and thank you for volunteering with us. It's about those things as well. Just almost making the organisation feel more familiar with people who are 17, 18, 19, 23 in the organisation. I think part of my job is to make that feel just much more standard practice. That makes sense.
Volunteering also helps. Like for me, it's helping me get because I've got a 2-1 in business management sort of thing.
Okay.
But because of COVID and stuff, I didn't really get the opportunity to get any experience. Because most jobs these days, you expect some sort of experience. Which volunteering Ardash is allowing me to
Brilliant.
get that.
That's
experience.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
No, so our last question after you is many of our young people attend that you need a dentist or some sort of medical care facility and can afford to pay privately. So how could we access dental care as NHS patient? As no dentists in Doncaster are taking it on NHS patients.
Okay. So Ardash doesn't provide dentistry. The last time I checked, there are 14 dentists in Doncaster who are taking on NHS patients.
Okay.
But you're right, the perception is
There is.
people won't. And the only reason I know there are is I've kind of gone through quite a complicated process of trying to work it out.
Yeah.
And when I say they're taking on NHS patients, they'll take on NHS patients within a particular geography. So I know that for something called the Integrated Commissioning Board, Integrated Care Board, ICBs, they will focus on dental access. But you're absolutely right. For lots of people, access to dentistry, getting your eyes, getting your ears sorted out are really important bits of the health service, and we underemphasise them. So we need to, somewhere like here, Better You, let's get the details. So for people coming here who can't get an NHS dentist, let's get it really clear how you can get dental treatment.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.